Welcome to Tiny Tom Talks. We are really excited to welcome our agricultural ecologist, Brenna Ness. And as usual, Tom Simpson, our research ecologist, is with us, and he's going to be doing the interview. So I'm going to stay in the background. We'll hold some of our questions till the end, and take it away, Tom.
Thank you, Jackie. I imagine a lot of people out there that really don't even know the conservation district has an agricultural program because prairies and cornfields seem so totally different. So we've got a lot of ground to cover today to learn about that. But before I get into questions about the program per se, I wonder if Brenna, if you could tell us just a little bit about yourself, how you came to the district, and it's kind of a general outline of what you do as the agricultural ecologist.
Sure. Yep, my name is Brenna Ness, and I grew up in Central Illinois, and I studied zoology at Southern Illinois University, and I earned my master's degree at Iowa State University in wildlife ecology. So my background is really wildlife focused. But after graduate school, I moved out east for about 6 years, where I worked for a nonprofit conservation organization that had a very similar mission to McHenry County Conservation District. They owned about the same acreage of land, but they operated with about 5% of the staff. So I had a lot of roles with that organization that included managing the farmland and managing the ag leases. So when I was looking to move back to the Midwest, and this agricultural ecologist position opened up, I was excited. This is a position that transitioned from a part-time role to a full-time role because the farm program at the district has really grown in size and in complexity. So they need a full-time staff person. And so as the agricultural ecologist, I monitor and I manage the farmland owned by the district that's currently in agricultural production, and it's leased out to producers. So the district has protected over 25,000 acres in McHenry County, and more than 25% of those acres are currently in agricultural production. So most of that is row crops, corn and soybeans. Some of it's cut for hay and some is grazed. And so I work with about 60 different producers to help create a balance between keeping our farmland productive and preserving or restoring its ecological health and function.
That's good. I'm trying to approach this from the standpoint of someone who's really completely unfamiliar with the ag program. And why does the conservation district have an ag program at all? I mean, why don't we, when we purchase land, why don't we simply restore it, not simply restore it, but restore it or preserve it or in some way either make it recreational area for the public or simply restore it for the plants and animals? Why do we have an ag program?
So the short answer to that question is that we don't have the staff or the financial resources to successfully restore all of the acreage at once, or create recreational opportunities, or manage it in the way that it should be. The longer answer is that in the early 2000s, there were 2 bond referendums that were passed, and it provided the district with an opportunity to protect thousands of acres across the county. And those land acquisitions strategically protected core areas of high-value habitat or corridors that connected natural areas. And so many of those acquisitions included farmland, although it wasn't the district's goal to acquire that farmland. It was a part of the property. So we ended up acquiring significant acreages of farmland, and the district recognized a need to be more intentional about farmland management. So the district's goal, of course, is to ultimately restore all of our farmland to either prairie or woodland or wetlands, depending on the pre-settlement vegetation communities or the soil types. But it's just not financially feasible to do everything at once. So in the meantime, agriculture serves as a beneficial partnership and a land management strategy until the district can successfully restore the remaining farmland.
Wait about 10 minutes.
He's due it on Sunday.
That's fine.
Okay. I'll wipe the tables down. Okay, sorry.
What are some of the the specific conservation practices we do. I mean, we're a conservation district and we're working with farmers in ag land. What are some of the specific conservation practices that we encourage our farmers to use?
Sure. So all of our leases require conservation practices that are aimed at protecting the soil, water, and surrounding habitats. And so for our cropland leases, that means we're reducing soil disturbance and erosion with minimal tillage. We're seeking to keep the soil covered with crop residue and or cover crops. We are reducing the need for pesticides with crop rotation and providing cover and travel corridors with grassy field borders or filter strips that also function to filter surface water runoff. So for our land that is hayed, that those conservation practices mean we are restricting how many times that fields can be cut and what time of year they can be cut to minimize any impacts to nesting birds or even insects.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I've been doing some of those bird surveys in our in those hay fields. They've been very productive of grassland birds. It seems to me that given that we're a conservation district and are really concerned with land conservation and all that, that we might have some restrictions that we place on farmers that maybe don't always agree with what farmers would do otherwise. And can you give us an example of that?
Sure, yeah. So obviously our farmers or the producers, they want to get the highest yields for their crops because that means a higher income, and farming is how they make their living. So but the reality is that some of the practices that you would use to increase your yields often might be in conflict with our goals to protect and conserve natural resources. So as an example, with our hay leases, I touched on timing of the cutting. And for our farm leases, nothing can be cut before July 15th. And if there are high densities of grassland birds, then we push that back even further to August 1st. But what that means for our tenants is that the hay or the grass that they're cutting is past its prime. It's not going to have the same nutritional value for the livestock that are going to be eating it. It's lower quality hay. And so that presents some challenges. And that issue, along with some other issues, are things that we have to work through and find solutions that work for both of us, or find tenants who are willing to make some sacrifices to work with us.
Okay, how do you see the farm program evolving over the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I've been here almost 3 years, and it seems like something is always changing within the farm program, constantly evolving. And so that could be based on things that are going on within the conservation district or things that are outside of our control. So just a quick example, we have recently realized that we're coming into more contact with herbicides that have higher residual activity in the soil. And that's so that farmers can manage weeds that have built up resistance to some of the more commonly used herbicides, but that creates challenges for us to restore that farmland. So we're trying to figure out how to best manage that issue right now. Restoring the farmland is our priority, but I think there's going to be some changes to how that restoration process looks. Other things that are in the process of moving at this point are we're exploring organic farming. We are looking at pesticide restrictions. We'd like to see more cover crop adoption on our cropland, and we're interested in expanding our grazing initiatives as well.
That's good. There's so many details to the program and interesting details. We could go on a long time, but I want to switch gears right now. I think a lot of people are aware that we have bison now at our Pleasant Valley Conservation Area site, and that is part of the agricultural program of the Conservation District. Can you tell us kind of where that program came from and what its objectives are?
Yeah. Well, so the district has wanted to integrate bison into our prairie restoration and our management for a really long time, long before I came on with the district. And the reason for that is that prairies evolved with bison, so they provide a lot of benefits to prairies, and they're an excellent management tool for the ecosystem. And so the reality, though, is logistically, it can be really challenging to just have bison, right? So the opportunity did present itself at Pleasant Valley in 2019 when our tenant there, who had been using the land for row crops and for cattle production, gave up the lease. And so we put together a request for proposals, and the goal for the project was to use grazing to provide productive habitat for grassland birds and other wildlife. And so Rooter Bison's proposal was selected, and they've been a great partner. They're a family-owned business raising bison to protect habitat for native wildlife and be a locally sourced alternative to beef. And so it's a really unique partnership. To my knowledge, there's not any other agencies that are leasing public land to a private bison producer. So we're excited about that partnership.
Where do you see the bison program going in the next few years?
It's a multi-step process. So right now the bison are grazing on 30 acres, but we recently restored 90 acres that still needs to be fenced. So our goal actually this year, hopefully, is to fence those 90 acres so that the bison can graze that area as well. So the primary goal of the whole project is to really assess the impact of bison grazing activity on the wildlife populations, the habitat quality, soil health. So those are things that we're monitoring every year through wildlife and vegetation surveys and through soil testing. And it's also a project we know the public is really excited about. So we want to continue to share the project and any findings. We do have educational programs and site visits. The bison property is not open to the public. So unfortunately, you can't stop by any time that you want, but we do have scheduled programs there. The next one is scheduled for April 14th, and we try to do a few of those throughout the year. So if you're interested, check our website for those opportunities.
Well, thank you, Brent. I could go on asking questions long into the afternoon. It's a fascinating program. I think people don't realize how deep and complicated our agricultural program is. But I want to pause myself and allow our audience to ask some questions if they'd like at this point.
All right, we're starting to get some questions in the chat already. That Bison Ranch Stories program Brenna mentioned, I put a link to in the chat. There's one spot left, but you can sign up and get on the wait list. If anybody cancels, you can get added into that program. First question, what is a cover crop and why do you need it?
It's a good question. I sometimes get too bogged down in the farm language and forget that these are not common terms. So a cover crop is sometimes also called a winter cover crop. So in conventional farming, you plant in the spring, you harvest in the fall, and that field would stay bare all winter long. But the concept of conservation farming or cover cropping is that you, in the fall, plant a crop. It can be multiple species, kind of like a cover that usually is a cool season crop that can germinate and grow in the winter time, or at least germinate, maybe not grow till it warms up again, but it has a living root in the soil. It's helping keep that soil healthy, reducing erosion and runoff, and just keeping the soil covered. So that's the goal of a cover crop.
Do any of the current tenants practice agroforestry?
That's a good question. None of our, well, not in the more, I'm not doing a good job of answering that question. So I would say yes, in a generalized way. So we do have filter strips around or field borders around all of our agricultural fields. And in some cases that includes trees and shrubs. So technically that is agroforestry, but I know that some of the More recent developments in agroforestry include planting strips of trees through your fields, and we don't have any of that going on right now. But I would say technically, yes, we're doing some agroforestry.
Kind of depends on your definition, I guess. Another question, has the district been able to lease all of the cropland owned by the district?
No, actually. So the reality is most of our cropland is not high quality cropland because that's not what we want to own, right? We want to own land that has high value for natural resources. So a lot of times, the fields that we try to lease for hay production, they're not of interest locally, and because that quality of the hay is lower. I talked about that. We have less of a problem leasing out row crops because that is there's high demand for that. But what else was I going to say about that? I lost my train of thought. But yes, sometimes we can't lease those hay fields, and then they just get managed by our ecologists.
Does the district try to minimize or prohibit the neonic coated seeds for corn or soybean on any district property?
Yes, so that is a practice that was implemented by the Illinois Department of Natural Resources on state-owned farmland in 2020 or 2021. And so that kind of opened the door for us too, to say, well, if they can do it, so can we. And so we also restricted neonicotinoids and neonicotinoid seed treatments on soybean seeds. We would love to restrict it on corn seed too. The state did not restrict it on corn seed either. And the reason for that is the way that the industry, the seed industry kind of operates, makes it really challenging for the farmer, the purchaser of the seed to say what they want on it. It just kind of, right now, the way things work is you have to get it treated. That's just the way it is. So hopefully one day we'll get to a point where we can say, don't put this on your corn seed.
Well, I have a question personally. I am really curious. You know, we talk about grazers and we think of cattle, but are there some other grazers being considered on district property? And we talked about bison a little bit.
Yeah, so
Are there goats?
our other grazers are, we've had cattle and sheep for a long time. And that's been a nice way to compare the impacts of cattle versus bison. But last year we also started a goat grazing initiative on a really small parcel. Goats are very different grazers. They prefer to eat, leaves on shrubs, and they do a good job of clearing out understory, which is a valuable asset for the district, but has to be managed in a different way. So that's something we're just now experimenting with.
Another thing I feel like is really valuable about the agricultural program is you're showing that best practices for conservation can be done. I know we had some volunteers that helped with the bioreactor. What is that for people who don't know, and why is that good?
Yep. So on one of our sites, we partnered with the McHenry County Farm Bureau and the University of Illinois to install a wood chip bioreactor in the edge of a farm field. So not in the farm field, but in the grassy field border of the farm field. And what it does is it filters the water that's being drained in the farm field through the tile, the drainage tile. And that drain tile takes water from the field directly into a river or creek. These things have been installed in farm fields across the state and across the country for 100 years. And so one of the goal of the bioreactor is to remove nitrates primarily from that water that's being filtered through the wood chips. And the goal is to improve water quality in the Mississippi River and beyond. So I forget what else you asked about that, but that's what a wood chip bioreactor is.
That was pretty much it. There's still some chance to ask your questions if anybody wants to unmute or put your question in the chat, and I can read it to Brenna for you. But any other burning questions you have, Tom, in the meantime?
No, just a follow-up comment. I mean, what Brenna, one of the last things you said was about the effect of removing nitrogens. We don't realize that what goes into the stream in McHenry County ends up in the Gulf of Mexico. And it affects everything from the field in McHenry County all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. And the huge dead zone that's formed in the Gulf of Mexico is just a result of the cumulative effect of just farmland all over the Midwest, sending a lot of fertilizer, bits and pieces of fertilizer downstream. And so it is conservation here, but it's also has huge effects downstream.
Awesome. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. So we're gonna thank Brenna for your time today and letting us rapid fire questions at you about the ag program. We are so excited to have you here. And if anyone wants to re-listen to this or share it with a friend, it'll be on our @DiscoverMCCD channel on YouTube under the Tom Talks playlist. And we'll get that posted within a couple of days or so. Thank you all for spending your time with us.
Yes,
Anything
thank you,
else want to
Brenna.
add, Tom?
Thanks for having me.
All right. Have a great day.